Hi, welcome to our discussion on climate resilience in action. We're thrilled to be part of the conversation at Financial Inclusion Week this year. Over the past couple of days, there have been some really exciting conversations around how to reach the last mile and how to build resilience. Some really innovative approaches on digital services that are helping to reduce cost, to build resilience, to also manage risks and make it really more accessible for people who are excluded. At the same time, we heard a call to action for more innovative partnerships between financial institutions and fintechs so that innovation can be financed for growth. Some important conversations around the importance of agency and specifically ensuring that people have control over their services that they're using, over their assets as you reach vulnerable communities, including women and young people. And importantly for us, almost a call to action for those of us working in the financial inclusion space to recognize that the gains that we've made in terms of improving people's lives and livelihoods are at risk if we're not able to also promote a livable planet. Today, we're going to be talking about how credit unions are grappling with these issues. As most of you know, credit unions are member-owned financial institutions. So that means they're essentially owned by their clients. And as a result, in particularly vulnerable communities, rural communities, credit unions often find themselves as the only financial service provider in those areas. And increasingly, as some communities become more vulnerable to climate exposure, they're seeing access to financial services start to decrease. And this plays out in different ways. You may see insurance companies who are starting to de-risk by reducing coverage for certain geographies or certain hazards. You might see banks or other financial institutions start to reduce their credit exposure in climate-exposed communities. And while this is happening, credit unions necessarily need to work with their members to understand how do you build their resilience and how can they thrive in the new climate environment. Next slide. Let me introduce myself quickly. I am Eileen Mayamidian, and I am the Technical Director for Inclusive Financial Services at the World Council of Credit Unions. We are a global APEC structure, and our members are national and regional credit union associations who together serve over 400 million members through almost 83,000 credit unions in 98 countries. On the next slide, we'll see a map which shows what our global reach looks like. And as you can see, many of the places where we work are vulnerable to climate shocks, either because they are coastal areas, and so they're facing floods or hurricanes, or more inland, they may be facing drought or heat exposure. So we're going to turn off the slides for a second and just meet the panel. So I am pleased here to be joined by people who are dealing with these same issues every single day. We have two of our members, Sicredi, which is one of the largest credit union associations in Brazil, as well as the Caribbean Confederation of Credit Unions that works throughout the different countries in the Caribbean. We are also joined by an important partner to the World Council in this climate battle, I would say, WOCCU Solutions, which offers a digital solution and is working with credit unions in about 5 countries to really help them to offer well-adapted, market-driven climate adaptation solutions and prepare to scale. So first of all, thank you all for joining us and making time to discuss on this panel. I wanted to ask you to each just take a second to introduce yourself and tell us a little about the organization you're representing. Can I start with Pedro?
Yeah, thank you, Eileen, for the opportunity to be here. I'm honored to be part of this panel. Thank you, Denise and Christopher, to join me in this discussion. Well, I'm Pedro Ramos. I'm in charge of Treasury Superintendence at Banco Cooperativo Sicredi in Brazil. Sicredi is a cooperative system, credit cooperative system with more than 104 credit unions presenting a whole 27 states of Brazil with more than 2.7 thousand branches in the whole country. And now we are the 6th largest financial institution in the country. As I told you, I'm in charge of the treasury, and in the treasury you have two departments very important. One of them is sustainable finance that provides technological support to increase our ESG, our level of governance inside Sicredi, and try to find partners outside Brazil to increase our potential solutions for our members. And I have two departments of macroeconomics that provide research in climate and forecast the weather to help farmers with droughts and climate events.
Thanks, Pedro. I appreciate you joining us. Denise, can I ask you to present a little about yourself? And I
Thank you,
think we have a
Eileen.
slide for her.
Thank you, Eileen. And it's a pleasure for me to share the stage with these panelists on the topic of climate action, resilience in action. I am the general manager at the Caribbean Confederation of Credit Unions, which is headquartered in St. Kitts. We are the regional apex trade and development association serving 17 countries. I think we have a picture showing all of those different countries that we serve of varying sizes and population within the English speaking Caribbean. We serve collectively over 200 credit unions, which represent almost 3 million members. What do we do? Our primary business is advocating for the cooperative sector in the Caribbean. We are responsible for research, marketing, representation, policy advocacy, training, and education. The foundation arm of our business is responsible for fostering social and community development and formulating programs for disaster relief, youth, and rural development. Our work in promoting climate adaptation through credit unions span around our leads who facilitate credit union programs. Now, we are pretty much in charge of educating our credit union boards and employees on climate risk and strategies and associated regulations. And we encourage credit unions to establish programs for members and employees to engage in. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. And Christoph.
Yes, hello everybody. Good to be here. Also, a quick introduction. I think we are a bit of the exotic animal. We do not have end customer operations. We work with financial institutions, primarily credit unions, really across the globe. And sharing a couple of slides very quickly for 3 minutes. We are predominantly active in Latin America, the Caribbean, and Africa, and focus on what we call digital and inclusive resilience finance. What are we referring for this? Well, the base process really for any customer-facing financial institution is taking on information from the customer. We do this via a technological platform, managing, automatically processing that information to identify climate risks, recommend concrete adaptation solutions, document, obviously, all loan details, and avoid greenwashing via transparency and traceability of operations. And in the end, customers adapt successfully with a suite of solutions that they can apply. The base principle for adaptation and resilience finance is linking concrete climate threats to concrete solutions, adaptation solutions. And it's starting with the exposure via geolocation services to specific climate threats, then according to the asset or the economic activity, the sensitivity to these climate threats, and finally leveraging what we can actually really do is increasing the adaptive capacity of the most vulnerable. And these adaptive capacity approaches are basically organized in operational taxonomies that help to understand, okay, what are concrete steps? So drip irrigation system, a drainage system for a home, or a rainwater harvesting system, and water filters for clean drinking water are just some examples. What do? Well, we digitize loan processes. We develop such operational taxonomies, not at country level, but at institutional level, so that loan officers and front office personnel can run it. We build the capacities internally. We construct the policies and procedures. We have the platform, obviously, for the climate risks. We monitor and evaluate the impact of the resulting loan portfolios, and we work increasingly on innovative funding mechanisms. What do our partners usually do? Well, they do these assessments, automated processing at transaction basis. And finally, they have a look at their portfolio and the composition as well as segmentation of the portfolio. This is a bit on my background, and we will see and hear more in the now coming discussion. Over to you, Eileen.
All right, thank you all very much. Before we start talking about what we're doing about climate, I think it's probably worth just talking a little bit about the problem and sort of why we're interested in this topic. Christoph, I want to start with you. Since Jaap's been looking at this question for a while, could you talk to us a little bit about globally, what are we seeing in terms of climate and the impact it's having on vulnerable communities?
Well, I think everybody that follows the daily press in almost any country, you will see that the news coverage on climate risk and on climate disasters is increasing steadily. So every year we read it was the hottest year on record. Every hurricane season is worse than the previous one. Every flooding season is worse than the previous one too. And not talking about wildfires and other consequences of climate risks. So what we see is climate change is here. It's not a topic for the future generations. It is something that is happening today. And the big injustice is really that those that have least contributed to this, overall disaster are those most affected, the most vulnerable. So rural communities, marginalized communities and populations, the elderly, the youth, and much too often women. So what we see is we have this really disbalance when it comes to how we treat climate change, and the financial sectors in general and credit unions specifically, they have not only the huge opportunity to address these topics, but they also have the responsibility to work with their members. And what we see lately is that there is more and more demand for clarification on how we can drive adaptation, how we can drive adaptation finance, resilience finance, how we can promote awareness raising and capacity building with the end beneficiaries and customers, the members of the credit unions, on how to build resilience, plan for the future, and address the climate disaster and the climate threat, basically based on their context-specific situation. So it's a promising situation, still a lot of work to be done.
All right, thanks. Denise, how are you seeing this in the Caribbean? What can you tell us a little bit about some of the impacts that you're seeing from climate change?
Well, as you know, almost all of the countries that we serve are in the hurricane belt, and or the earthquake belt, if you want to put it that way as well. So what we find is that you have excessive heat, and we have that almost on an annual basis. We have the impact of credit unions, of hurricanes, my apologies. So this year alone, we had Hurricane Beryl, which touched practically almost all of our member countries. But the impact was mostly greatly at 3 of the countries, Jamaica, Grenada, and as well as St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But this is almost on an annual basis. We've had Dominica, and it's just like a total destruction of the vulnerable population in terms of their homes, in terms of their livestock, their livelihoods are all damaged. I would say that we have, though, implemented things, but I'll get to that in our solutions.
Okay. And just to sort of supplement that, I just wanted to share, we did have a couple of pictures of some of the damages from the recent hurricanes. And so if we have ability to bring that up, let's go ahead and do it. Okay. So we're having some technical problems. We'll skip that. Pedro, can you talk to me not just about the challenges that, there we go. Sorry, we can bring that down. Thanks a lot, Christophe. Socrates been looking at this issue for quite a while. So could you talk to us a little bit about sort of what was Socrates' journey? How did you get involved in climate? What are some of the challenges that you were trying to address? And, what does it look like? What does climate finance look like at Socrates today?
Well, Aline, we see that cooperative were created by provide service and product for their members and their communities when the markets and the government could not create and offer them these products. And this is an important aspect about cooperatives. And then when you study the successful climate transition and resilience case, we can find some cases that large company could organize, coordinate, and brought technology to their suppliers in order to create a sustainable supply chain. This always, of course, that companies create their own sustainable products to meet their final demand. The point here is many companies that wait by the government or wait by the regulation or wait by the market, they don't see anything happen and they need change their response for this problem and start organizing their suppliers. That's happened because usually when you have a small business or individuals working, it's very difficult to coordinate and to have a sustainable supply chain, because if any link inside this chain is broken or not active the sustainability in this process, the economic benefit to be sustainable is not catch for all growth. And then the big companies understand that need coordinating in this process. And of course, you need a technology to produce better, in a better way, more sustainable, and at the same time keep on paying the bills. You need to be create a system that is economically available. And then I believe, the technology is something that individuals and small companies that is difficult to develop and create. And then again appear some companies that lead these groups and brought technology to them. And then when I believe that I look for the cooperative, I believe the cooperative can fill the role of coordinating and bring technology to their members, offering what the market and the government cannot bring again. And this is not the position to become more important for the communities, but there is an aspect related to resilience. When, of course, you can raise your capital requirement to support more loss in front of new risks, but I think the smart way to lead this process are working together your members to them with them to allow us become more resilient. And when your member become resilient, your credit portfolio become resilient and your institution become resilient. And then I think there is two important facts here. One is the lead the communities and the small business and individuals to sustainability and creating engagement to the cooperative. The second one is creating resilience because it's the better way to handle with this problem, not just raising the capital to support more loss. For Sicredi, we create a sustainable strategy some years ago that incorporates the best management practices in ESG. Nowadays, Sicredi is the financial institution in Brazil with lowest ESG risks ranked by Sustainalytics. And we create a climate agenda focused on development programs, initiatives to reduce the climate impacts, and developing financial and non-financial solutions. This is a very important aspect. Of course, financial solutions is a loan, specific loans to provide new technologies, not a different way to produce, but non-financial is very important to bring it technology, technical assistance, new ways to manage their the farms and small farms and SMEs in small and medium entrepreneurs, and the impact. And we want to create these programs in order to develop in our communities. That's something that's very important for our community. Now, currently, we are measuring our greenhouse gas emission from our credit portfolio to create a map or a strategy more effective in order to create a portfolio more sustainable in the future. But you asked me if it is easy or hard this this situation, and I can say that is very complex. There is a lot of misinformation, critical, different point of view about how climate change is important and political bias. We have a program inside Secret called Integrated Crop, Livestock, and Forest System. It's a very important system to produce food with low green gas emission and with increased profitability of the land of the farmers, profitability. And this program is completely we can finance in Brazil with low interest rates, substantial grace periods, and these resources are underutilized. Even in Secret and other financial institutions, this is a program from Brazilian government. And then we believe there is an important lack about knowledge and cultural barriers that must be overcome first, then offer the loans. If I can say advice here about our experience until now, I can tell it's very important work closely with the members, understand their needs, and provide information how important are ingress on the transition and the resilience process.
Thanks a lot. So it is interesting, and I saw both Christophe and Denise nodding along that it's not always obvious to everybody, even if they're getting hit by climate shocks, that the institutions and the credit unions need to make that move to sort of adopting new policies. So there was a need for you to build that buy-in among your members. Denise, can you talk a little bit about sort of what your journey's been in terms of why CCCU has started looking at climate and what you've been offering to date?
Okay, thanks, Eileen. Well, what we've found over the years in terms of, I will specifically look at the hurricane, destructions, and of course, the excessive heat. But our building codes have changed in the region, and that has helped. What you found that while the credit union buildings are mostly secured, credit unions have developed loan products for concrete roofing, as opposed to bagasse or just regular type housing. And we've also done solar energy for members. In terms of agricultural products, members who are in agriculture are mostly affected when hurricanes hit. They are unable to pay their loans due to destruction of their crops. But I want to focus a little on one of our countries to give an example of some of the solutions that we are looking at. In Belize, they rank 5th at risk in the world for climate change. The agriculture, fisheries, and livestock sectors are particularly vulnerable to climate change. And as Pedro mentioned, the micro, small, and medium enterprises, In Belize, they make up 70% of the export crops. I must say that donor agencies and external governments supported the Credit Union League in Belize and 3 other credit unions with financial products that customized around climate adaptation. They looked at reviewing and enhancing a green finance product for livestock sector. They developed an institutional greening policy and action plan to reinforce environmentally friendly habits for each credit union. And they also conducted a climate risk assessment of the league's portfolio through its own digital climate risk tool, training loan officers to use it during their business inspections. And additionally, what we found in the other leagues is like in Jamaica and in Dominica, the leagues offer parametric insurance to credit unions in the event agricultural and fisherfolk members are affected. So once there is an extreme weather event, the insurance company pays out the claim. And what this has done is it has helped the credit union member to not be delinquent, as well as it has helped to continue to service the loan. So the credit union benefits as well as the member benefits. I would also like to say that in looking at the premium payment, because I know that it varies across the region. So some leagues pay the premium, some credit unions pay the premium for the member, and the member pays the premium, or it can be a combination of all 3 or 2. But for credit unions, they have, in terms of their buildings, they have, storm shutters, energy efficient appliances. Before it was diesel backup generators, they're now looking at solar powered generators. They also have disaster recovery teams, which is made up of IT, facilities, as well as operations and finance in the credit unions. Some credit unions offer line of credit loan products for members and interest-free loans for employees at least 3 to 5 days prior to the expected disaster, especially when payday has passed. So those different options that are available and solutions have helped us to mitigate against some of those climate adaptation strategies.
Okay, thanks. It's interesting to hear how there's been so many different strategies being used in the different credit unions. And when I was speaking with you, one of the things I learned is that even before there was an actual deliberate climate strategy, a lot of the credit unions actually started to offer these products out of necessity. So one of the things we're seeing is that, by default or by design, we are going to have to support our members in the climate. Pedro, do you want to, maybe back to you, to talk a little bit about some of the specific solutions that Socredi has been offering?
Yeah, well, actually, in Brazil, we have some favorite conditions come from blended financing from Brazilian government, and they can offer lower interest rates, grace periods, and repayment terms in very, I would say, good conditions. And more notable program with all these peerings is Renova Agro, which is finance activities aimed in reducing greenhouse gas emission, preventing deforestation, and programs that increase the agricultural productivity through the sustainable practices. In the last Plano Safra is the government plan. We can see in this year a progress in using this kind of lines, but we think we are in the beginning of this process. And we believe this initiative are pivotal in driving some activities, especially agriculture, towards to be more green and more resilient in the future. There is another lines that I'd like to mention. One of them was the solar panel to individuals. In almost 3 years, we created the biggest portfolio in Brazil, offering through the combining with technical assistance by local players. we could create a 10 billion reais portfolio, like a 2.5 billion dollars credit portfolio. And with this action, we avoid CO2 with this action. Another special loan that we have are for human entrepreneur. This is a line very important for a social, not a green directly, but helps with the resilience. And we offer to humans entrepreneurs, as I told you, and we can offer special in special conditions, special in municipalities with a lower level of development human index. And we have some awards related with this line in 2023 and two in 2024. And about our strategy with our communities, we have lines in our credit portfolio located for renewable energy, low carbon agriculture, clean transportation, energy efficient, and many ESG proposals. And I think that both the two lowest more important are solar panel and humans entrepreneur. The point one thing that I would like to mention is the tool that will help us with the run sustainable strategies. We use satellite images to handle with the natural disaster or to prevent monitoring deforestation or areas that we make we do some loans, and you want to check if the land is incorrectly place. I mean, it's not in deforestation area. This is an important topic in Brazil. And floods, and including the next, we had an important flood in 2024. We can see in the image that are sharing in 10 days rain, like equivalent to 3 months in Rio Grande do Sul, in southern of Brazil. And then many important cities was inside literally inside the water. And then we can use the satellite image. Can you next, Christopher? We can use the space images from satellite to find the where our members was impacted by the floods. And then we could create a specific strategy to release their deposits or renegotiate or create new loans for them based on the size of the damage that floods affect our members. Then we see this solution for Sicredi as very important one. Seems to monitoring deforestation and droughts but in the floods was essentially to make our credit strategy with people that was affected by natural disaster.
Thanks a lot. So that is actually really interesting that you were able to take a solution that you had designed for deforestation and actually use it to help you identify and support the people who were affected by the floods. So it's interesting to see how the technology is evolving and its uses. I want to take a step back for a second. One of the things that financial institutions, including credit unions, need to think about is regulations. And we recognize that increasingly, the question of climate and climate risk is making its way into financial sector regulations. Christoph, I wanted to maybe just ask you to talk a little bit about what you're seeing, what this evolution looks like, and how it might be affecting financial institutions and credit unions moving forward.
Yeah, what we see is clearly in developed markets such as Europe or the United States, you have regulation which is rapidly advancing. So me personally, I think in 5-10 years, we will not be talking anymore about climate finance. It will just be finance, and climate will be an integral part of it. What does it mean? Well, we have two leading bodies which are developing the main recommendations, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures and the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. Those two topics, climate and nature, will merge eventually. And what we see is now, though it is not yet mandatory, but on a voluntary basis, the recommendations of the TCFD and expectingly also of the TNFD, Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, are forming part of the international financial reporting standards. So this is the first step. We need to disclose where do we have risks in our portfolios. And this will be becoming increasingly mandatory. There are some countries, such as Brazil, they're very well advanced. They have a very strong regulatory framework, and you have other countries that are still lagging behind. But the tendency in the direction is very clear. What does it mean now for credit unions, or what does it mean in general for the inclusive finance space? Well, I think it is a benefit in this case, but also a disadvantage that we are usually working at the bottom of the pyramid. So very low formality, mostly informal businesses. Often you do not have this regulatory supervision to the last end. So we might gain some time, so we might have a bit of time left. This is only looking from the regulatory space. Nevertheless, investors, as soon as you need external investment, as soon as you want even to have grants or non-reimbursable funds to develop certain initiatives and projects and programs with your members, you will see that you need to be able to disclose your climate impacts. So even if it is not directly a regulatory impact, it will be becoming more and more important also when it comes outside of regulation. So for example, for grant funding. So what we can expect is not only that the supervision and monitoring is increasing and that the attention is increasing, but also the solutions are getting ever better. So what you have seen with Pedro is there's a lot of data. You see an animation, but there's a lot of data behind it, and you need to manage this data. And not only is this data available as of today in granularity and update frequency that we had never before, but also do we have the technological tools which enable us to harness that data. So Pedro said they basically changed their focus from deforestation considerations towards, okay, where are we most affected and our members most affected by the flood? This is because you can apply technology and you can react swiftly. You can learn from the data that you are using. You can learn from the impacts on your customers. So it's not only regulation, which will be increasing, but it's also the opportunity to harness what we can use as of today in terms of data and tools and technologies.
Okay, thanks a lot. That's kind of a good overview. One of the things that I wanted to maybe ask, I'll give this one to Pedro. How does the cooperative model affect your ability to respond to regulatory changes and or to respond to these climate shocks? So as I mentioned at the beginning, credit unions are member owned. What difference does that make when we're looking at sort of moving forward in climate?
Well, Ellen, this is a very interesting answer. And when you see the cooperative model thrives on working together with their communities and maintain close relationship with their members. This approach allows the cooperatives to improve the screening process and access information beyond the ordinary data. I mean ordinary data like the register, the detail, address, income, even transaction from a credit card payment, historical payment. We cannot now explain completely the human behavior. And then sometimes, of course, all these tools helps a lot to make decision, but we cannot, we can have a super precise model to fit the true probability if each person to default. And then I believe the cooperative has advantage of knowing their members better and reduce asymmetric information, creating better measure of default risk. And in addition, they can customize better the products. We can think that in financial markets, very important you customize because you understand the business of your client or your member, and then you can offer something customized for them, and then creating much more capacity to be repaid than a simple and unique model of financing. As a result, we can see more effective way to work with the groups that's cheap to hard to access data or have more complex screening process. Usually vulnerable people and SMEs are in this group. From the macroeconomic perspective, cooperatives have a complementary work with the banks or traditional banks. Because they can work with the people that traditional banks has more difficult to work. Usually, groups that information is not much available. And when you combine this theory with climate change, we can see that new events are happening, and this increase the risk and increase the asymmetric information. And then I believe the cooperative can better equipped to manage this challenge, especially after a natural disaster. Because after a disaster, the impacts usually are especially for cooperatives, uh, usually get an important portion of the members. Cooperatives working in the regionalized way in some municipalities or even a state, and then there is a huge natural disaster, and then most part of their portfolio are exposed to the risk. And then I believe the credit union with this proximity and the capacity to work person by person, case by case, they can create a discretionary process to renegotiating, to do new loans for the community that have a problem. In this year, Rio Grande do Sul was the base of the Sicredi, where Sicredi born in Brazil, was affected with the worst flood in our history. It was happening in May of this year. And this approach was very important to allow our delinquency rates remain stable while we keep supporting our members during this process, because we act individual by individual, understand their needs and understand the impact. Of course, as I told you in the last question, we use technology to identify who are in the better and worst situation, but you use that. This is much different from other financial institutions that usually use a simple rules of just cut the limits of some community because happen a strong impact and they cannot measure correctly the risk, and then create a simple rules, but create a even better a even worse situation for vulnerable people. They have less access to financial, and when have impact from disaster, they have their limits cut down. And then I believe the cooperative can do much different and use their superpower, that is the connection with the community, to find the way to refinancing, release the deposits, and restructuring their debits, uh, in the way to find, of course, sustainability for the business, but help the population when they need.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. I think that's really important. That idea of sort of managing the proximity and combining it with the technology, which has really helped kind of help the credit union movement to really be a little bit more proactive in dealing with climate. I want to ask our panelists to look a little bit toward the future. I'm going to start with Christoph. You mentioned data a bit earlier. I wanted to maybe just kind of ask you to talk a little bit more about how you see data currently being used and where you think sort of increased volumes of data could take sort of climate adaptation finance in the future.
Yeah, well, as I said, we have much better data available today. You have much more satellites screening the Earth on a daily, hourly basis, in some regions even real-time basis. So obviously we have a very strong data environment, and as we have said on this panel before, we will not have very concise models for each and every position, for each and every transaction, for each and every member or client. But the models are getting ever better. When it comes to the projection of climate risks or threats, we have very good data when it comes to most of agricultural and animal husbandry sensitivity data. So it's a difference how sensitive I am. And what we usually widespreadly lack is the data on what are the best solutions. We are often talking about disaster recovery, so what happens after the fact. But the biggest opportunity probably is in identifying what was in place before the disaster happened and who is affected by the disaster in what way, so that we can start using data in measuring impacts. And this is what we are also focusing on, is building these operational taxonomies. So think 100, 150, 100, 200 different climate solutions available in a local context that can be applied to different climate threats according to a specific member's or customer's situation. So the biggest data opportunity probably is in this realm. Well, we as Yapu, we are social fintech. We are focusing on the development. Obviously, it's not only a buzzword, there is technology behind it, AI. Yeah. So applying deep learning and machine learning to these very complex interrelations between climate threats on one hand, climate sensitivities on the other, according to asset or economic activity, and finally the composition of different solutions and practices in place which limit these risks. So this is where the biggest data developments probably will happen, as the climate data is getting ever better and the sensitivity data is getting ever better. But this greenfielding of adaptation solutions is probably the biggest opportunity. And where especially AI and data mining in general and big data can be applied and used and harnessed to learn. Adaptation is a process, and we need to learn, and we don't know enough, but we will learn enough in order to tackle the crisis.
Right, thanks a lot. So we have a few more minutes. I want to ask each of our panelists to kind of tell us where you're going in the future. So we've talked a little bit about the solutions, we've talked about the challenges that you face, but Denise, maybe let's start with the Caribbean. What are you looking at doing? What are your major climate priorities over the next few years?
Well, Eileen, I would say that we started just about last year in looking at partnerships. And in June of this year, we partnered with Inclusive, and we are executing in the next year and a half climate finance trainings right across the region, all 17 member countries, whereby we are going to be developing climate finance products for the credit union movement. We've started the process, but we've gotten funding to help us with the climate finance trainings. Funding is critical for the region. Awareness, education Those are our three critical areas where climate is concerned. Um, Members do have an understanding, but we have to create that atmosphere, and the education, the terminology, etc., needs to be as simple for membership. Yes, we talk on the panel and we use all the fancy terms, but to our regular members, it's basically nothing to them. So, the awareness and the education at that level has to continue, and that is where we're focused, in addition to helping the credit unions to understand climate finance products. And we have 3 cohorts next year, where we will be training all the credit unions across the region.
Interesting. And also, you had mentioned that because increased heat is actually driving up power prices, this
Yes.
solar project is not only a climate mitigation, but it's actually an adaptation strategy. So to help
Correct.
your members really deal with the fact that the increased heat is making it very difficult for them to afford power.
And I spoke earlier about concrete roofing, which makes
Yeah.
makes it a little worse. So we've changed the codes to, for the impact of the hurricanes, but then now we have the excessive heat to contend with. So, it never ends. It never ends.
All right, thanks a lot. Pedro, where's Socrates' priorities with regards to climate looking forward?
Well, we are working on measuring our greenhouse gas emissions from our credit portfolio. We believe this is an important step to create a credit portfolio strategy more sustainable, because now we create some loans, special offers to our members based on specifically technology, for example, electric cars or panel solars, or a new way to produce soy or cattle, for example. And but we want to see the whole picture and work to reach more quickly sustainable credit portfolio. But at the same time, we will work with our members to find technical solutions, especially for agriculture, and some activities that are more exposed to transition, and create what's called the modes. That it means we can combine offering the loan with the technical assistant at the same time, because we need not just provide the financing, but we need educated and show who can help them with the transition. And then it's a part of financial solution, but we think with our experience until now is very important. Provide the loan, but at the same time bring the technology together to them, because if you just put on your branch that possibility, the possibility will be there in the next year. You should offer and give you a package actually for the our members. And then we want to create new modes, and we are working for in methane avoid, and some yerba mate project that can capture carbon and sell credit carbons in unregulated markets. But well, we keep in this strategy. Of course, we always work with financial education with our members. That's a pillar to all subjects inside the cooperative and inside the credit unions. But we see this important step for climate change too, because then when they understand the financing, they can understand why they need change, why the impacts, and how the impacts affect their financial life. And then is an important step too. but we will keep working with this subject during this year.
Pedro, one of the things that you're saying, thank you. One of the things that you just said reminds me of a conversation that I heard yesterday where they were talking about the need to make sure that as we're financing climate, we're focusing on the problem and not a specific solution. And so I think what I'm hearing you say is, we need to be able to offer and make sure they're informed and they know what their options are. And I think, Christoph, maybe I'll ask you to just talk a little bit about how YAPU helps credit unions to do that.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's part of our future plans. So we have 3 core topics. One is taxonomy, one is AI, and the third one is innovative financing mechanisms. Taxonomy, as Denise said, we need to break it down also into simple language. Not only the end beneficiaries, the members, the customers, but also the front office personnel. They need to understand what we are talking about when we are talking about solutions, especially when we have a bottom-up approach, customer-centric development of such solutions. So this is where we are focusing more country analyses, where we develop such operational taxonomies for different institutions across a lot of countries. Second one is AI. I mentioned it. We are developing an AI which focuses on 2 main topics. One is an AI induced or fed climate risk scoring, and then a recommendation system, which we have also today, expert base, which helps to decide on the next best step in what usually are adaptation strategies, not adaptation projects, but strategies. And the third one are innovative funding mechanisms, as we are totally convinced that, and I think this is the way to go also for credit unions: digitize, have transparency, have traceability, and then you are able not only to work with this data, AI, but you are also able to have different ways on accessing funding, either reimbursable funding, debt funding in order to finance portfolios, but it can also be government funding, subsidies. It can be result-based grants, which cover partially at least the investment. So developing these innovative funding mechanisms, I think this is something we see across the different regions coming up, at least from, for example, the Green Climate Fund, over $1 billion coming over the next couple of weeks and maybe months. So there are huge opportunities which can benefit the members finally. So stay tuned. What is happening? Back to you.
Okay.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you. And Denise, I will give you the final word. Any additional thoughts, lessons, or plans for the future?
Well, it's interesting. I remember, I think Christoph started out by saying water harvesting, etc. And I remember growing up, that was commonplace in the households, and to know that we have to go right back there, it's quite interesting. So I find that they always say, the earth is a circle, so everything that goes around comes right back around, and it's just probably in a more advanced way, but not to forget where we're coming from, and looking at those lessons from way back then that we should continue to implement, the planting of the trees, just those little basic things, taking the rainfall, etc. But I think it's climate risk and strategies is so wide. It is so wide, and we really have to continue to educate our populations right across the region, not just in the Caribbean, but right across. Our members basically suffer because they are just not educated and aware of some of the things that are happening globally.
Okay. Thank you all very much for this interesting panel. It's been really encouraging to see all the work that you've been doing and the way that you've sort of helped to use your cooperative model, your digital technologies to continue to strive to serve the communities where you work. For those of you, sorry, can you go up one more slide, please, Christoph, the previous slide? For those of you who are interested in learning a little bit more about credit unions, tomorrow is actually International Credit Union Day. And so we would welcome you to join us at the hashtag that you see up there on the screen to learn a little bit more about credit unions, what we're doing today, and also to tackle a little bit how we're looking at the future. So We'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to participate and listen to our panel. It's been a pleasure to be here with you. And once again, we're really happy to be part of this conversation. Thank you all very much.
Happy International Credit Union Day to you tomorrow.
Thank you to all of you
exactly.
as well.
Thanks a lot for having us. Thanks, Eileen, and thanks
Thank
to the
you
organizers.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.